Hey, Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Coming up on today's show, we're talking to Jackson Frank about Darius Garland, about Evan Mobley, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's all coming up today on Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the car parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Cavs podcast. I am Chris Manning. Evan Dammarell, my co-host, is with me. Evan, did you know that as we are obviously the first $1 billion Cavs podcast, we are also the first Cavs podcast that we are taking Rolls Royces to go see alligators?
Yeah, no, that is. I did not know that we were the first to do this, but I'm not surprised at this point. It's
Yes,
good to know though.
I have a new bit that I'm going to try out until we get to the season, and I'm going to start pulling DJ Drama brags from the album Sir Baudelaire, or sorry, the album Call Me If You Get Lost from Tyler, the Creator. And I'm just going to bring those out and see how many people notice. This is what we're going to do. Well, it's August. Who cares? But joining us is Jackson Frank from a lot of places, including The Analyst, Dime. He hosts the House That Hinkie Built podcast over at Blue Wire. Jackson, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Doing well. Appreciate the two of you having me on.
No, I mean, you're slumming it. But Evan, how are you?
I'm good, man. The alligators were good. They were a little bitier than I thought they would be.
Yeah,
but,
a little chompy.
We're just getting off the work day on a Monday, so hope everyone had a good weekend. It is hotter than hell outside in Cleveland right now, so I went for a run this morning, and I'm still feeling the after effects of it. But other than that, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing, man. Back in the work week, played a lot of golf over the weekend, and it was very hot playing golf. It was very hot playing golf.
Yeah, hopefully it breaks soon. I don't enjoy this heat mixed with the humidity.
Yeah, it's not what you want. But if you're unfamiliar and you're watching us new for the first time, please hit that subscribe button. Hit that, as Evan would say, hit that notification bell. Get notified when we go live or a new episode comes up. I think we'll be doing a live mailbag here soon, so you might want to tap in for that. But today we're talking all about Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Jackson, I just want to ask you this to sort of lay a groundwork here before we just kind of dive into building with these two guys. A, what did you think of Mobley at Summer League? And B, was there any thought for you that he shouldn't have been the guy at 3? Because I don't know if you're aware of there's like a contingent that is like they should have taken Suggs. Suggs is really the guy I think a lot of people liked. I think Suggs obviously is really interesting. But for you, what are your answers to those two basic questions before we dive in here?
Yeah, so I do have to preface that anything I watched of him in Summer League was like with an eye and a half. I wasn't watching everything super in depth.
Well, that is the way to watch Summer League basketball, honestly, in my mind. Like it is limited, especially when the Cavs are like, what if we don't bring a point guard?
That's true. Yeah, they decided let's run everything by Isaac Okoro. I was mostly impressed. I thought he still had I know the scoring efficiency wasn't great, but you saw some really impressive off the dribble flashes. He had some of the same passes. The defense in the games I saw, I think the game I watched the most closely was the first one against the Rockets, and then the second one against Suggs. I think he played 3 of them right, and those were the first 2. I think. I know the scoring efficiency wasn't great in either one, but was pretty dang impressive defensively, just with his ability to do a bunch of different things and influence a bunch of different plays. And then the flashes of kind of shot creation from the perimeter, and then some passing. It's about what I expected. I think the scoring development will take a little bit of time, especially. I mean, he's a guy that definitely has some self-creation, upside in him. But from the get-go, he's going to be a player that is an awesome lob threat, awesome on the short roll. And as you mentioned, Chris, the Cavs were trying to kind of explore the depths of Isaac Okoro's ball handling game. They didn't have an actual point guard to, just run a bunch of pick and rolls up top with Mobley every play. So overall, pretty optimistic and encouraged by what I saw. And I think when he's playing with, I know the defenses will be better in the NBA, but when he's playing with a legit passer like Darius Garland and a guy who can really score the ball like Colin Sexton, his play finishing, the lob stuff will look a lot easier and seamless.
Do you think he should have been the 3rd overall pick? Because what Chris mentioned is something I've been seeing as well, is Cavs fans at least kind of doing hand wringing, whether it's Jonathan Kuminga or I've seen Scotty Barnes, and then Suggs is obviously the best. They're the biggest name of the bunch, and people think like, oh, what could have been for them? And I don't know. I think Mobley was the right pick at 3, but I could be wrong.
No, I mean, so I didn't do as much draft work this year. I had kind of a good understanding of the top 4 or 5 guys. So I knew Cade, I knew Mobley, I knew Suggs, I knew the other Jalen Green. Not the other Jalen. That's even rude to Jalen Green. But I thought he was absolutely the right pick at 3. And I don't think you shouldn't, regardless of what happened in the summer league. Not that you're doing this, but anyway, that should not affect how you feel about the pick. Of course, I get it with fans, but he was absolutely the right pick. They needed a guy who could they run some offense through, who's bigger than 6'1", 6'2". And Evan Mobley is that kind of guy. They needed a kind of a defensive anchor long term. I know that Jarrett Allen's only 23, but I think that's not to say he doesn't fit with them. But I like kind of what Mobley can bring in terms of he's a little more versatile defensively. Allen obviously is very good on defense, but I think he was absolutely the right pick. He just provides a nice release valve in a lot of ways for the small guards, and then defensively he's such a versatile defender. He's going to be able to just kind of mitigate a lot of the things that Garland and Sexton struggle with, and those are different things. I think Garland can really struggle with some point of attack stuff because he's so slight of frame, but does some nice stuff off the ball. Sexton, is a little bulkier, and so he can do a little more on the ball, but off the ball with his awareness and things, that's maybe where he struggles a little more. So I like kind of Mobley's ability to cover for both of those things. So I absolutely think he was a really good pick at 3. And for me, it's weird to say that he's a steal at 3, but I do think he was the second best guy in this class. Jalen Green's very good as well, but I think he was surplus value at 3. Honestly, so he was the right pick for me. But Jalen Green could prove that wrong. He's tremendous as well. But at the very worst, I think he'll be worth the kind of the 3rd overall pick, and that's what you want. I think he's gonna be really good.
So I think one of the interesting questions for me, at least with Mobley, is what is he going to add to the Cavs offense in some way, right? This is a guy that I think has a ton of playmaking potential, has a ton of ability to maybe start putting the ball on the floor a little bit in attack. It isn't hard for me to see him adding muscle a la Giannis and bully guys from the elbow and just make, even if it is not the most skillful thing, the brute force can be very, very effective, especially if he can hit his free throws and everything goes along with that. I think that the short-term question that I think the Cavs have to add, because they are trying to, Evan, you tell me if this is incorrect in your mind, but accelerate a little bit. They're trying to do something to go a little bit forward in the next 12 months or so. Looking at this team that is what does Mobley add to an offense in year 1? And I think that thinking about what the Cavs were on offense last year, which was to me very boring, very bland, not really inventive, and making things easier for everyone. I have questions about if we're going to see Mobley add to that, or he's just going to be ask you to do very simple stuff and they just try to tread water, or if they're going to try to use him in creative ways from day one. I think that to me is maybe one of the 5 most important questions about determining the Cavs' success this season. Is that an incorrect sort of read for you in my mind?
No,
read for me in my mind.
I think that's totally reasonable. And the times I think you'll see more of kind of exploring the depths of what Mobley can do is maybe when he's the backup 5 rather than the starting 4. I mean, I imagine he's going to start alongside Jarrett and the 2 guards and maybe a core. I don't know.
Well, there's still this Kevin Love out thing that is just there, and we don't really know what's happening with that. Which they have a lot of they have a lot of good 4s, and he probably should start. But it's also does Kevin is Kevin Love gonna? He's already not happy. Is he gonna be tolerable? If he's playing 15, 20 minutes off the bench, is that a thing that you could? I don't know. These are locker room questions. I don't think we know the answer to as we're talking in late August.
Yeah, but my point is, I think when he's the 5, I think and he has a little more space to operate, just in terms of operating the paint, because he can operate on the perimeter. I don't really have to worry about that. You'll see maybe some more of the stuff, the elbow face-ups, driving from the perimeter in the wing. But I think at the same time, it's okay if his role is simplified offensively in the starting unit, because he's a really good roller, because he's such a quick decision maker as a passer, because he can make high-level reads as a passer. It's not just the timeliness of which he executes them. It's a lot of stuff that the 98% of big men won't execute. And so I think that's kind of what I'm most curious about, is to monitor what exactly they do to try and explore the depths of his offense and how they view him. As you pointed out, Chris, the offense last year wasn't very creative. There wasn't. I mean, they would often run an initial action, and the play would either work or it didn't, and then it was like, all right, Colin, all right, Darius, make something happen. And so I would hope that with a little more offensive talent, that would expand the playbook for Bickerstaff. But I don't feel great about it. Like they had some pretty interesting offensive players and skills last year, whether it was Okoro's ability to cut or his ability to maybe attack if a defense actually closed out. Garland was obviously a pretty good off-ball player. Sexton was awesome off the ball last year. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about it, but I'm trying to stay like as rosy as I can because I do really like what the Cavs are building with their young guys. So I hope that answers the question, but I think you'll see kind of divergent kind of usages of Mobley depending on kind of the lineup around him and things like that, which I think is smart. I think it's important to kind of see him in different roles.
Chris, before we go to break, I have a question for you.
Hit me.
How brutal the opening stretch is for the Cavs, they play Charlotte, Atlanta, Denver, both LA teams. They play the Suns. In their first 7 or so, one Cavs source said to me at least that he wouldn't be surprised if they started 0-7 and it's skies falling. How quickly do you think Cavs fans will overreact to not only that, but maybe Evan Mobley not performing as well as some of those aforementioned players we talked about at the top?
I mean, I would argue they're already overreacting. They looked at Summer League, which is built for Jalen.
This is the base level.
Yeah. Okay,
it's gonna get worse.
But I think that's silly, and I think that comes to this question that I think I have with the Cavs as an organization is like I don't know if they know what they want to be right now. I think that what we all is like I want to emulate the Suns and the Hawks. That is skipping like 5 steps to get to where that is, right? Like,
well,
in my mind, it
those
is more,
teams to open the season, so we'll find out.
And they play Charlotte, who is like more akin to like there's like a 6-point per 100 possession gap between those teams last year in terms of like their net rating, which is like a pretty big gap. But it's like you have to make up that gap before you're talking about like getting to like Atlanta or like the Knicks or Phoenix, who made the freaking finals. Like you have these massive things to get through, and you're potentially starting a starting lineup that is all 23 and under.
The average age will be 21.5.
Yeah, it is all really young. None of these guys have signed a second contract. Only one of them is eligible for a second contract. Like, you're in a very particular place, and I think it is like there is more growing pains to come that people are probably going to get annoyed by when like Jalen Suggs looks like awesome for the Magic and like is like the guy, or like Jalen Green drops like a 35-point game and like a 20-point loss for the Houston Rockets. Like that is like Summer League was already that in a mini bubble because like Green was like awesome for a lot of it, played really well against the Cavs in particular, and people were like, "Holy shit! Like, did we miss on this here? Did we miss in this creator guy?" And then Suggs just like Suggs just has something about him that is I think is very easy to get it and fall in love with. He was really fun to watch in person. He's bigger than I thought, frankly. Like he did some really really fun stuff and made some really big plays in close games in Summer League. Like, and he has the NCAA reputation from the stuff he did at Gonzaga that Mobley just didn't, and that doesn't like ultimately matter if you're thinking about like who might still be like way better in 5 years. It is Mobley, but I think there's a level of patience that I don't know how many Cavs people have. That as you alluded to, like that opening schedule, Memphis, Atlanta, and Charlotte as your first 3 games is like not exactly like you're not getting like you're not getting Detroit, and you get Denver soon. Like there's going to be stuff where like you're going to get this team thrown into the deep end early, and I think that's going to be kind of interesting to see. Like I thought it was interesting that we should go to break, but 26.5 was like the bet online Cavs over under. I thought that would be a 5-win increase from last year in the condensed season.
Believe
5.5 because it's not. They've gone 19, 19, and 21. I think win total wise, like 5.5 wins, like more is like still like kind of depressing if you're like trying to hope this team is going to be a play-in team, but like that's still not like terrible if your team is really young. And I don't want to like move the goalposts or anything, but Evan, gotta say, if there was something that people needed, they wanted to keep themselves cool, they should probably check out our friends at Sweatblock.
They should.
How smooth was that, by the way? Doctor recommended. Sweatblock works up for 7 days per use. It is a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweatblock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. It is featured and tested on the Rachel ratio by firefighters. I mean, come on, freaking firefighters. Bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years. Over 13,000 reviews, and it's manufactured in the U.S. Wear what you want to wear when you want to wear it. It's your little secret to being confident because you're not going to sweat through that gray t-shirt you love to wear. It is a must-have for everyone's toiletry bag, whether it's a big presentation or a great date. Everyone can benefit. There are a few things in life, obviously, that aren't just fun to talk about, and one of them is excessive sweating. So check out Sweatblock, and maybe they can help you out. If you or someone you love is dealing with this, you have to check out Sweatblock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with promo code LOCKEDON, or at Amazon or CVS. And they have a whole range of products as well, including deodorant and some other stuff as well. So shout out to Sweatblock.
This episode of Locked On Cavs is also sponsored by BetOnline. It's that time of year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, open now at BetOnline. Head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive a 100%, that's 50% more than normal, welcome bonus. But be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo, which means you make a bet on Thursday, September 9th, season opener between the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys, and if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, do not wait and take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts, and don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON.
All right, let's move on to Darius Garland a little bit, guys. I'm going to just ask a true or false, and I want both of you to answer and kind of talk about this a little before I get this, before my big mouth says anything else. True or false, Darius Garland has the biggest burden, let's say, on him next year in terms of creating for the Cavs offense. True or false, Darius Garland has that on him heading into next season?
That's a good question.
It is a good one. I have to chew on it.
I'll guess a very clear yes.
I will say yes, but at the same time, I think it's still lesser than it was for stretches last year. If that is, because I think Mobley will help. I think they clearly want to explore what Okoro can do as a creator. Sexton always continues to add different facets or improve different facets of his game, whether it's the passing, the off-ball scoring. It's not inconceivable that Jared Allen's maybe a little better on the short roll. Maybe he takes a few more pick and pop threes. I know that's not necessarily creation for them, but things that are beyond like, okay, Darius, run a pick and roll 74 times a game and find the proper thing to do. I think it won't be as frequent, but I still think it'll have a big burden. But I mean, there were stretches last year when both Love and Nance were out and whatnot, and where it was a ton of work for Garland, and he was up to it for stretches, but I think it won't be as massive this year, but I still would lean yes to your initial question.
I think I'd lean yes as well, and I'll take some of Jackson's points with me too, that the Cavs on paper are better by just adding Evan Mobley, and then you factor in Isaac Okoro's growth and development, and you factor in what Colin Sexton's adding to his game, and from what I've gathered, it's taking more threes because his offense will just become easier for him if he becomes more of a spot-up shooter, more of a catch-and-shoot shooter from beyond the arc. Darius will have more options and more weapons around him because Kevin Love and Larry Nance Jr. are two really good players the Cavs have tried to play through in the past, and JV Bickerstaff shared with me wanted to make like the offensive anchors for the team just in terms of like bench units and the starting lineup, and clearly that didn't work out because both of them were hurt for the majority of last year. I think Darius is able to take the leap, but I think the Cavs have also surrounded him with some nice pieces that'll make it better. But I think there's just going to be a lot of growing pains as well, so I don't want to put a ton of pressure and expectations on him. I don't want to put a ton of pressure and expectations on any of these young players because, like we talked about the last segment, the average age of the starting unit is going to be 21.5 if you go with all 5 young players as the starting 5. It's going to get ugly at times. It's going to get messy at times, and you don't want to, I guess, just temper things a little bit. Like, yeah, you're going to see flashes of potential and why this all makes sense. And, like, okay, this is why the Cavs took Darius Garland 5th overall after taking Colin Sexton 8th overall the year prior. But at the same time, yeah, I could say there's a little bit of added pressure because he's also going to be extension eligible the following offseason. So I think he's going to want to go out there and try to show why he's worth the Cavs' time and money.
I tend to think that it is true that he just has so much on his shoulders because I don't know who else is going to fill really what he does. I think asking Mobley to do some of like the really high level connective tissue stuff you need in year one, or at least right away, is going to be a lot to ask of him. I think Colin has improved as a creator, but it is not in the way where it's like he's going to do some of the stuff to really like make everything work around him. He can run a pick and roll with Jared Allen, but it's going to be like he's going to make that simple read, and where Darius is going to kind of like pass him open vertically and stuff like that. He just hasn't added that to his game, and I need to see it before I can kind of bank on it.
Well, in theory, that's why they added Ricky Rubio, isn't it? Because they need an adult on the floor, and Rubio is kind of a break glass in case of emergency if like one of them, the young players, self-combust.
Yeah. Well, and then the question is like, okay, like I think one of the other big questions is like, how much can Rubio play with Sexton? How much can, because I think you want to see him play with more Sexton than Garland in theory, just to kind of balance out your lineups a little bit. But like Rubio's the only other guy on the team that I think you can look at from day one and think like, okay, like this guy can really just kind of orchestrate things for us. Like Okoro maybe can add some of that to his game, and you want to give him reps, I think. But like, is his ceiling? I think his ceiling is going to be more as like a slasher and as an off-ball guy more than it is, creating. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a creative hub. I think Darius might be on the verge of getting to. I would also just say like, if Mobley pops right away with that is one thing. And then thirdly, I think if you just kind of look at what could potentially be happening with Kevin Love just hasn't been that guy. And if he's around on the team, he's going to space the floor for you and like rebound. That's all he's really going to do at this point. Like he's not like I've been saying since like 2018 that like Kevin Love at the elbow is a thing the Cavs could like lean on, and they just, I guess, like haven't done it for variety of availability and all these questions. Like, I just think Darius has to be the guy that does this. And I think him and Mobley, like when I talked to him at Summer League, the thing that he said twice, he said vibes a lot in his answers, which was I'm all for that. Let's talk about the vibes. But the second thing he talked about was like really trying to say, I need to help Mobley get acclimated. I need to help him get settled. And I think like that is going to be his role. Like let's just assume he plays, what did Evan need, like 29 minutes a game last year, maybe? Something like that. Darius, like I think like 29, something like, yeah. Like let's say he plays like 29 to 32. Rubio's maybe playing like 25, 30. Like I guess like we're gonna see what the split looks like. I think it's gonna be like a lot of
33.1 minutes per game.
That's more than I thought. So let's just say he plays the same amount, and Rubio's playing. There's some overlap. I think obviously it's kind of inevitable, but he's playing a more like 20 to 25, something like that. I would imagine you're going to have a lot of situations where it's like he's the guy that has to kind of make all of this flow. And I just think how JB starts the year and then how him and the coaching staff like tinker as the year goes on is going to be real interesting, because like if Mobley shows that he can do some of the creation that he's flashed, like that's a really good thing for your offense. But is it going to, do you trust it from day one? I think JB like might be a guy that makes him earn that role a little bit, right? Like he's going to have to do the other stuff before he allows him and empowers him to do that stuff. That is kind of JB's MO, I think, in terms of how he approaches coaching. And I think there's some bumps that are going to maybe come from just not like, there's going to be bumps regardless, but like you're picking the kind of bumps maybe you're getting if you go that route. I don't know. I just don't know what this is going to look like, considering like last year was weird. The year before was weird. Like John Beilein was the head coach of this team at the start of 2 seasons ago, which is just a bizarre thing to think about. And like, I don't think JB's offense last year was like particularly like, it was a lot of double drag. It was a lot of like pick and roll. And it was a lot of like pretty just run the same kind of basic sets with slight variations, but nothing like the Cavs don't run like Spain pick and roll. They don't run like, they don't run like anything like the Heat do, where like Duncan Robinson runs across and like kind of cuts himself open with some screen staggered. And like, they've never run anything with that complexity. Like, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen like a set with that kind of depth to it, and Cleveland probably needs that if they're going to milk this offense to not be like bottom 10 in the league again.
Yeah, I think it's a good position for Garland, to be honest, because he has the outline of being a really, really high level primary initiator. I mean, it's kind of what the scoring kind of efficiency gets to. I think the passing's there. I mean, right? I mean, he's such a good passer already. I think it's a matter of kind of figuring out the proper shot profile. And so I think these reps will be good for him. And I think it'll be it'll be worthwhile to have kind of a little more diversity of players around him. With Mobley there, maybe Okoro being a little, I would say diversified in his offense, which we saw at the end of last year. But unfortunately, that kind of coincided with Garland nursing an ankle injury. So I think this will be really good for him because I think at times like young guys need certain roles, but I think with Garland offensively, he's shown the makings of being such a high level player. I mean, you've seen there's certain games where he really kind of puts it all together, and so I think kind of having that freedom and flexibility with some talent around him will be really good for him, and you'll start to figure out kind of the proper ways to try and tie everything together. So I'm really excited to see what it is, and I think even if there are quite a few growing pains, it'll really benefit him because he is the caliber of offensive player potentially that should have this freedom to kind of explore what he can do.
Chris, does Sidney Lowe fix the Cavs offense suddenly too?
I don't know. I think like I don't think they hired
a solid enough hire.
Yeah, it's a good hire for like organizational like development and like having another adult around. But like I don't know if that was like the offensive coordinator I think people were probably looking for.
No, I know the Cavs had interviewed a lot of offensive assistants with an offensive repertoire to them, but they went to other organizations. Sidney Lowe's. I think we're going to see a lot of vanilla offensive sets from Cleveland next year. I'm trying to temper people's expectations a little bit again.
Before we're going to break, I just will say I think the hope would be that last year I think the offense was better post Drummond because you didn't feel like this obligation to post up Andre Drummond, which like was a dumb decision to begin with. But like Evan, I have that Wolves.
You're trying to get him traded.
Okay, but do you remember the Wolves game where it was like the Wolves didn't have a healthy center and they posted Drummond like 35 times?
Oh, I remember. I wish I could forget it.
Yeah, like
no amount of therapy will help me forget it.
That wasn't helping Drummond's trade value. That wasn't helping anyone. That was just like bad game planning. What the Cavs could have done to help get Andre Drummond out of town sooner? Tune up his car using our friends at Rock Auto. That's right.
With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low and are for every customer. Rock Auto has everything you need and that you could ask for, including brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find a solution to your auto parts needs. So if you're interested, go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Check them out today at rockauto.com.
All right, last segment. Jackson, I want to ask you this. What are your expectations broadly for the Cavs going into 2021, 2022? Where you just add on them, and how do Mobley and Garland kind of fit into your expectations for what this team is?
Yeah, so I would say I'm definitely among just neutral observers. I'm very much one of the more vocal proponents of the Cavs core. I really believe in Garland. I think there's a legit chance he wins Most Improved or is a front runner for it, and is maybe on the fringes of the All-Star team next year. And it's pretty deep, pool of talent in both conferences. But what we saw from him post All-Star break before the injury was really encouraging. But I think, as Evan and both of you have noted, this is a young team. If they start those five young guys, like as much as I love kind of what they could bring in 3 years, the fact of the matter is it's not what's happening right now. So. But I think if they, I wouldn't be opposed to them maybe putting Nance this kind of getting on a tangent, putting Nance at the 3 and having Okoro come off the bench and seeing what he can do as a creator with a little less creation around him, kind of explore that. But that would also maybe be a little bit detrimental to their win-loss total. But so getting back on track, I think they should be better than last year. A full year of Jared Allen helps. He's just a very good, competent player. Evan Mobley, I think, helps them as well. So, but it's also tough because, as you both noted, their starting schedule is really tough, and sometimes that can influence the direction an organization takes. If they had a really easy schedule, maybe they were maybe we can get into the play-in. That kind of affects things. So, I expect them to hover in that 28 to 33 win range. I could see them maybe getting closer to 35, 36 if the development breaks right out of the young guys. But they should be better than last year. But I really do think that grueling start to the year will influence some of the kind of their vision for the rest of the season. So that makes me a little lower, just plus how many young guys they're trying to balance their development and all that. So, but I remain really encouraged with what the Cavs are doing, even if they still are light on shooting. I think there are other ways to space the floor, and maybe a little more offensive ingenuity could help alleviate that. But I think it'll still be kind of a rough year for the Cavs, but definitely something that like by the end of the season, fans will be encouraged by because they have a lot of good young guys. That's kind of most important when you're rebuilding.
You mentioned the lack of shooting and proper wing depth, and it's kind of been floated in the ether by Chris Fedor at this point that the Cleveland might be trying to make Larry Nance Jr. available to upgrade on the wing, just because, let's be honest, they're not trading Kevin Love's contract, and I think a buyout, at least from what I heard, it's going to stall for a little bit. Would you be higher on the Cavs, or would you be lower on them if they flipped Larry Nance for a wing player? Like, Chris could probably float some names because he's been chewing on this more than I have lately.
Let's just say Dylan Brooks as like sort of like the guy who's like most dominant, or you could go slow-mo as well. So one of those two guys,
Anderson or Brooks from Memphis, but you're sacrificing Larry Nance Jr. to kind of bring a little bit more balance to your rotation.
And there is probably like another name out there that is like theoretically available. I'm just struggling and like asking around about this to find guys that like right now, before the season has started, after moves have been made, that like if there's like a wing that is like actually readily available via trade. And again, like this is a highly, like everyone needs more wings, and the Cavs just happen to have like one proven one in Okoro, and you could even like if you're saying like, Okoro's had 1 year, and I'm skeptical, and say that's also fair.
It's tough. I think Slow-Mo is a better player than Dylan Brooks, and I think what he brings would be useful for the Cavs in a lot of ways. With the connective passing, the defense, he's just a very good defender in a lot of ways, understanding of angles, his body control. But Brooks, like they still need more shot creation, right? And Brooks, for all of his faults, whether it's the over-aggressive defense, some of the affinity for mid-range when there's an open kick-out, can create his own shot at a high level. You saw it in the playoffs. You saw it a ton from Memphis the last couple of years. I think that would make sense too, but Nance is important. I mean, Nance was the biggest reason last year the Cavs got off to a good start and why they were a very good defense to open the season. He's just a phenomenal player. So I don't think it would move my perception of them one way or the other very much. I would understand. I understand kind of the drive to maybe find an actual three because I mean Nance can play some three, but he's best is kind of more down by the basket, getting the passing lanes, mucking things up there. But I mean it's kind of a non-answer, but to me, I just don't think either one of those guys really changes how I view them, even if I understand the drive to do so. Because Nance is a really good player when he's on the floor, but obviously that's something that unfortunately hasn't always been, an option for him in recent seasons.
Well, and I think the other part of it is like this can get overvalued, but like he likes being in Cleveland. Like he generally likes being in Cleveland. You have him under contract very affordably for a couple more years. It wouldn't shock me if he turns free agency at 30, and even if like he could maybe go to a contender. Like I think he just generally likes it. I think the big issue ultimately, and I keep saying this on the show, is like I think like when you have, I think that the problem really goes back to more than like you can't like it's hard to trade for one of these guys. I almost think it just goes to like you could have had money to maybe overpay in a certain instance, right? Like I don't think like there was necessarily like a ton of guys on the market that I totally like would have loved the big price tag for, but like could you have like tried to throw some money at like a Will Barton is just like a stopgap like wing kind of creator type? Could you have tried to throw money like at Duncan Robinson if you wanted to go really good? Could you have gotten in the Doug McDermott conversation? Like Doug McDermott got 3 years, $42 million. Like that's not unreasonable for like a pretty good shooter wing type, and you desperately need that. And you're in this position now where I think like so much of like the offense functioning depends on you getting quality wing minutes out of Okoro as a shooter. I think he's going to defend and like attack closeouts and cut pretty well. It's just like, can he shoot like league average from 3? Can you rebuild Dylan Windler? Can you get Jetty Osman back to like 2 years ago, he shot 38% from 3 on like pretty good volume. Like, can you get him back to like not being a disaster like he was last year? Like, does Lamar Stevens pop in a way that maybe we're not expecting? Like, there are just these like things where it's like, it's very dependent on the Cavs figuring it out more than it is like, because they just didn't have money. Like they couldn't go out and like make a real offer to Josh Hart, who got like a pretty like by all accounts, like a pretty like team-friendly, non-guaranteed deal for like a pretty solid NBA player in a way that was kind of surprising to me. Like you couldn't even get in that conversation without having to finesse like a complicated sign and trade and like give up stuff because you don't have the flexibility. And like that's how I think you get into talking yourself into like, should we trade this like pretty good rotation player who like actually can kind of shoot now, even if he doesn't maybe take enough threes in because we don't have the money because we paid Kevin Love a lot of money like 3 years ago. And like that's, I think the tricky part where the Cavs are in it. It's like, you need to hit on something internally in a way that like, it's hard for us to like, I don't know if Jetty Osman is eligible. I don't know if Dylan Windler can like figure it out. Like these are things they're going to have to try for the first half of the season. I just don't know what other options they really have, unless like, Matt Ryan from Summer League like is going to be on a 2-way and maybe plays because he just will take threes and make them at a decent clip. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Cavs like success, however you want to define that, in terms of like actual wins and losses, and maybe tying together some of the funkiness of the roster, because there are good players and there are encouraging young players, is largely tied to like, can Sexton and or Garland, take that next leap? Like, I know that like, I know impact metrics can always be, kind of wonky, but can they actually get into a place where you're like, yeah, this guy may like based on this metric or these metrics, like he's an actual high level impact guard, rather than like, we like some of the flashes and whatnot, but maybe the defense isn't there and the shooting efficiency isn't always there. Like if they can actually take that step to where you're looking at this guy as an above average starting guard, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility for either guy. I think that would really kind of tie some things together. I think it would make things a lot easier for the rest of the roster. Allen's going to be good, but he remains a guy who is dependent on players setting him up. Okoro's going to be better, but he's also similarly a guy that like someone has to like draw attention for him to get open for a cut, right? Like someone has to demand that his defender looks elsewhere and then he can figure it out. The shooting obviously could take a step forward, but it's still going to take some time for defenses to actually respect that. And so I think a lot of that comes down to those two young guards, and I doesn't mean to like put pressure on them, but I think it's reliant on them. But at the same time, I think at least one of them could probably prove capable of kind of reaching that level. But everything offensively starts with kind of a guy who can effectively run and flow a lot of offense through. And I think one of those guys kind of has to actually become that player rather than showing a lot of inklings of it. That's not to say like if they don't do it this year, it's like, oh, they're destined to just be middling players. But I think if you really want to see the Cavs take a step forward in this process, with their rebuild, it'll be contingent on those two, which makes sense. A lot of the discussions have always centered around those two last couple of years.
Evan, any final questions, thoughts, takes you want to get off before we get out of here for today?
Well, I try to see, other than this upcoming weekend when the Browns play the Falcons, so Matt Ryan may not be that available for the Cavs until early January, mid to early January at this point. So, Chris, if you sign into a 2-way deal, you might really, really be waiting this one out. Are you comfortable with that decision?
Look, Dan Gilbert's money has no limits, so
that's true.
I'll fill in for him in the meantime. I can.
Yeah, and like FedEx, yeah. Jackson will come in, shoot some threes. It'll be great, and then he'll come back from playing under FedEx, heir to the FedEx fortune, Falcons head coach Arthur Smith, and just be in really good shape. Like he's going to be around money. He's going to be good. He can train like. Maybe he can get some like time in with like the don't the Hawks have a G League team like in Atlanta now? Like
they do.
It's fine. It's fine. He can get some work and it's totally okay. You can use all 45 2-way days after the NFL season ends. He can get like 2 weeks to recover. He can come in, just get some shots up, get that soreness out of his body, and then be good to go.
That's wild. I did not know Arthur Smith was the heir to the FedEx fortune, because I thought at first he said owner. I'm like, the owner of the Falcons started
No, not
Home Depot.
Not Arthur Blank, the other very rich man involved with the Atlanta Falcons who's named Arthur. But yes, he's the heir to the FedEx fortune. I learned that like a year ago, and I haven't stopped thinking about it ever since.
That's wild, man.
Evan's brain is just snapped. But I think the Cavs are going to be interesting. I just don't know if the interesting is going to result in anything.
That I saw the Falcons' stupid gradient alternative uniforms, and if they went against the Browns this weekend, I'm just going to chuckle to myself because, God, they're atrocious.
Yeah, preseason football. It's all atrocious. It's all bad.
Super Bowl, Super Browns, baby.
Yeah, let's go. Jackson, thanks again for coming on. Just give everyone a plug up where they can find you in everything you have going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at JackFrank_JJF. Everywhere I write and talk about the NBA is listed in my bio there. just doing off-season content. I've got my podcast, The House the Hinkie Built, coming out, episodes 2 to 3 times a week, covering different Sixers things. So Andre Drummond is now my guy to watch. We'll see. We'll do a post-up tracker for the two of you throughout.
Can't wait for Drummond in Philly. Can't wait. Extremely vibe. I can't wait to see how that plays out in like 6 months. Can't wait.
I got a year of Dwight. I can do a year of Drummond. So, it'll be all good. But that's where you can find my work. Two of you have me on. Always enjoy talking Cavs. Both of you know that I'm a vocal proponent of what they're building, and I hope to see it take a step forward this year. And then maybe a couple of years we'll talk about a Cavs playoff series or something like that. So,
yeah. Ooh. Yeah, look, and I think a couple of years is a reasonable time. I think they're going to get antsy this year, and we'll see where that gets them. But Evan, why don't you take us out?
Well, it'll be fitting if Andre Drummond sticks in Philly if Cleveland knocks out Philly in the first round at the NBA playoffs one year because of an Andre Drummond gaffe.
With future Cav Ben Simmons, you know?
Yeah, with future Cavalier Ben Simmons. But for those of you checking us out on YouTube for the first time or coming back, we really appreciate it. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. We post these episodes 3 times a week, usually during the off season. We might be mixing things up and doing 4 or 5 episodes this week, depending on how technology does for us. But please see if you have the notification bell on, you'll know when it happens. But I am Evan Dammarell. He is Chris Manning. This is Locked On Cavs. Thanks for tuning in.